Hello, good morning, and welcome. This is Sunrise Daily. I'm Ayo Makinde. Well, we'll go straight into the papers this morning, but before we do that, there is this issue that's already, caught so many people's attention in Nigeria and other parts of the world. And that's the case of a Nigerian diplomat that was manhandled in Indonesia. Well, the Nigerian government has gotten ahead of the story, so there is not much, at least a lot of damage that could have been done has been arrested. So it is gratifying to know that government has gotten ahead of that one. So any shade of hypotheses or conspiracy theories has been nipped in the bud. But before we even say anything, take a look.
My leg! No! I can't breathe! No! I can't
All right, so that's the video, and it's you can just imagine, what must have happened and all of that. And there are several questions in that video, several questions that, are right there in the video that you are watching right now. Who shot the video? The press release that came from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs says the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is in receipt of a report and has seen a video in circulation regarding an unacceptable incident in Jakarta, Indonesia, concerning the manhandling and arrest of a Nigerian diplomatic agent in front of his official quarters on August 7, 2021. This unfortunate incident is against international law and the Vienna Conventions governing diplomatic and consular relations between states. The Nigerian government has complained strongly to the government of Indonesia, and the ambassador of Indonesia to Nigeria was summoned by the Nigerian Minister of Foreign Affairs and apologized unreservedly on behalf of the government of Indonesia. The Nigerian government has sent an official protest to the government of Indonesia. The ambassador of Nigeria to Indonesia has confirmed that immigration officials involved had since come to the Nigerian embassy to apologize to the ambassador and the diplomat concerned. So this document says that the Indonesian immigration officials involved have since come to apologize. Immigration officials, not even the police. So there are several questions in this video. In the first place, what happened? It's immigration. Is it that he didn't show his papers when he came into the country? Did he just get into the country? What are the circumstances that necessitated him being arrested? And it was just this man and not just another one. For God's sake, he's a diplomat. It's not even the police. There wasn't any allegation against him. Well, what the government has told us so far is that the ambassador has explained what he knew. The question is, what happened? What made it necessary in the first place that a Nigerian diplomat would be handled this way? Secondly, who shot the video and why was the video shot in the first place? What was the intention? You can see that the official here was looking at the camera. There was an objective. Question is, what are the objectives? What is intended for shooting this, for arresting this man, for molesting a Nigerian government official in Indonesia? It's literally saying that Nigeria is being molested here. The question is why? What are the things that necessitated this? This is a diplomat. How many Nigerians are there in Indonesia that may have been handled or manhandled the same way that nobody may be aware of? You can see in the background of the video that there are some other people who are seeing from outside what was happening, and so many questions in this video that need answering. We're just hoping that government will be able to come out and help Nigerians understand what this is and have an assurance that This is not something that is going to happen to me, to them, if they find themselves in Jakarta, Indonesia. The man crossed in immigration and entered the country, and he was arrested and molested right inside the capital city. Questions. Why? Why was the video shot? Why was it immigration and not police? Many questions, and we are just waiting. Let's take a look at some of the papers this morning as we begin the show. Oh, Malcolm, good morning.
Good morning, Ayo. A pretty disturbing video which we saw right there. Pretty distressing to watch. And, you know, I think it just brings memories of George Floyd flooding right back in, because you heard him saying right there, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And even though, yes, you've raised questions as to the motive of those who shot the video, perhaps we should thank them for, you know, shooting such a video, because we would never have known what happened to him otherwise. You just try and imagine that the gentleman came out and was trying to explain what had transpired in that vehicle. It would have been very difficult to comprehend, or even he might have been too traumatized to explain just what happened to him. But when you look at the fact that three Indonesian immigration officials, we're just on one person. I don't know, is that the mode of arrest in Indonesia? We're not aware, we don't know. But as you rightly pointed out, Ayo, if that could be the fate of a Nigerian diplomat, you know, then what is the fate of ordinary people carrying ordinary passports? You know, that's ordinary green passport, not a diplomatic passport. There are huge questions as to what transpired. And even though, yes, our Foreign Affairs Ministry is already on it, and, you know, it's already been taken up, you know, in the highest quarters, I think that we also deserve a right to know. I mean, Nigerians, because this is all insulting our common sensibility as Nigerians. We need to know that this is not something that is usually targeted at Nigerians, because as I pointed out earlier, Ayo, and you did highlight that as well, if this is the fate of a Nigerian diplomat, there are huge questions as to how we are regarded in Indonesia, and what the fate of the everyday Nigerian will be, whoever decides to visit their country. So we need to hear and understand in very clear terms this is not how Nigerians are regarded in their country, and that, you know, whatever damages need to be paid, and if the officials need to be brought to book, those responsible for this sort of despicable behavior, that they are actually brought to justice. I do not know if this is following any template of arrest in Indonesia, or if it's following if this is a mode of arrest within the immigration of Indonesia. But they might need to review their mode of arrest or operations when it comes, because I believe that they are more humane and more decent ways, even if a diplomat has done something wrong, to address the issue. And even if the person was an ordinary citizen and wasn't even carrying a diplomatic passport, I want to imagine that there are ways, there are decent ways to treat human beings, because that was what the world, and you should remember that what happened in the United States with George Floyd wasn't just about the United States of America, because that protest rocked not just the United States, it went on in Europe as well, most of Europe, and we also saw our own version here. So it is that people are beginning to decry, you know, inhuman treatment in any form, targeted oftentimes at people of color. That's one of the reasons why the Black Lives Matter movement didn't just happen in the US, it also happened in many other places as well. So hopefully, I don't think that Indonesia wants to start its own Black Lives Matter movement. I want to believe that there are enough lessons to learn from, and that they need to be reassuring us, reassuring not just Nigeria now, because we are not just representative of this country, we are also representative of the continent, Africa, because 1 in 6 black people is a Nigerian. So we want to imagine that this is not something targeted at our country, nationality, or our skin color. I want to imagine that message will be passed home pretty clearly, and that there will be a little more transparency in giving us clarity as to what transpired here and what has happened to the officials who carried out this sort of act. Ayo.
Certainly, Mokwe, we're just waiting to ensure that at least, first of all, the needful is done, and some of those other, perspectives to the issues that you raised are also giving attention. So let's go to the papers now, see what the papers are saying. Let's begin with the Daily Trust's newspaper this morning. And Daily Trust leads with IPOB forces residents off streets in Southeast. There were differences of opinions, so to speak, yesterday on the front pages of some of the dailies yesterday, saying that there may be some kind of crack in the rank and file of IPOB, given that someone had said, no, this sit at home is not going to happen because of this or because of that. But this is what you have here. Of course, that didn't come without consequences. Trapped passenger, 3 buses set ablaze in Imo. Oh my, that's what you have right there. And you see some of the effects, the pictures, and all of that on the front page. One of the writers also says, students miss NECO exams. That is one of the consequences. 2 killed in bloody clash in Newi. Sit-at-home order observed in Aba, ignored in Umuahia. Find that story on page 5 of the paper this morning, as well as right under the nameplate, kidnappers on rampage, abduct commissioner in Niger, kidnap pastor, wife 28, and kill 15, sack 14 communities in Sokoto. Kidnap pastor, wife, 28 others in Kwara. That's what you have on page 4 of the paper this morning. So we have stories coming from Niger, Sokoto, and Kwara states, all talking about kidnappers this morning. And right above the headline, the main story, PDP crisis. Governors fail to agree on Secondus' strike, Secondus' sack. Stories on page 25. Court orders forfeiture of Okorocha's property, and how bandits abducted Niger commissioner, tormented wife and baby. That story is on page 3 of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. Okay.
Well, let's quickly run through the leadership, but we're going to come back to it right now, right away. Maybe I should ask you to go ahead, Ayo, because we do have a guest with us here in Abuja, and we're going to be introducing him shortly. He's going to be going through some of the papers with us this morning to focus on some of the headlines. But while we get that set, I am going to ask you to please take the next paper.
Well, thank you for giving me that opportunity, Marco, because I just realized that there is a very heartbreaking piece on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. 9 Nigerians die of malaria every hour. On the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. And this is definitely something to bring to the attention of the authorities. Well, it was said by the minister. You may want to find out which minister said it on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. The story you'll find on page 30 of the Daily Trust. 9 Nigerians die of malaria every hour. Is right there on the right column on your screen. And if this happens, 9 Nigerians die of malaria every hour. Just yesterday, we were, having a conversation around the cholera outbreak, and we were told that 60 Nigerians have died as a result of a cholera outbreak in Katsina State. And if that has happened, and we know that Nigerians die every hour of malaria, so then, what are we doing? Have we given us significant attention to malaria, which is one of the top 5 killer diseases in the world, as we are given to COVID-19, which many people would say is not as, it doesn't look or feel like it's as deadly as malaria. It is something that can be treated, but then this is the situation that we find, ourselves handling right now. And I'm hoping that the authorities will be able to tell us what can be done to also nip this in the bud. All right, so while we're waiting for that, the sit-at-home order is also the lead story on the front page of the Daily Times newspaper this morning. Okay, Markwe, you ready now? You ready?
Yes, we are. Thank you so much, Aya, for holding fort. But let's quickly take a look at what leadership has on the front page. Before I do that, let's quickly introduce our guest. We're being joined this morning by Mr. Igo Akeriga, who is a member of the Nigerian Guild of Editors. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us.
All right.
Look at this on the front page of leadership newspapers. Niger commissioner abducted, joins 238 others in bandits' den. 136 Islamia pupils, 59 farmers, 33 others still in captivity. Kidnappers strike in Kwara, abduct 9, demand 30 million naira ransom. Well, that's leadership newspapers, just in case they're wondering where we are. I don't know. I think we saw stories like this yesterday in the headlines, but leadership has stayed on this story in terms of the children who have been kidnapped from the Islamia school, and now it looks like it doesn't matter who you are. A commissioner in Niger State has now been abducted. What are your thoughts on this story?
Well, good morning, Nigerians. I'm sure that very many people have gone beyond a state of shock now. We're actually in a state of anomaly in the country right now. The president is away, he's receiving he's on medical vacation, as we are told. In very serious climb, the president will rush back home to address the situation. But it will appear as if those of us who are outside of government and those in government are already used to the situation. And we have found ourselves in a helpless situation. Every day, the newspaper headlines relishes with stories of kidnapping, murder, assassinations, and all of that. It is sad, and at a time that we are faced with an uneven educational advantage between the South and North. When all efforts are being made to bridge that gap, we are now seeing many schools in the North shut down. Pupils are in the bushes. Well, I won't blame the security forces. They are doing the most that they can, to intervene. But clearly, we have been overwhelmed as a country, and this government, clearly do not have a new strategy to deal with the situation. Eric Cleaver says that you cannot, no, sorry, that's Lord Denning, who is the father of modern law, a British jurist, did say that you cannot do something, the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. So clearly it's either this government has not evolved fresh strategies to deal with these issues, or for me really as a journalist, sometimes I have a feeling that there's some kind of complacency and collaboration on the part of some highly placed persons. I do not, if you ask the police to go after bandits and kidnappers, only the police, they'll get these guys out. So, not to talk of the combined military, civil defense, everybody. No, I don't want to believe that our security forces have been overwhelmed. I just think that there's something that we are not doing right, or something that is being hidden from the rest of us that we do not know. But who stands to benefit? For me, Nigerians are losing, and the state is losing, because any country that does not educate its citizens clearly is on the path of self-destruct.
It is highly significant that you point out the fact that a lot of schools are being shut down. Don't forget that when the president did leave the country, part of the reason why he traveled was because of the education summit.
Oh, absolutely.
I was supposed to be getting some monies, to invest in our education sector. Absolutely. He recognizes the importance of education, but when we look at how security is impacting negatively on education, there are huge questions about the strategy which we adopted.
Absolutely,
really.
Absolutely. The president, in fact, for some of us, I was sitting with some colleagues and we were discussing the president's participation in the Educational Summit in the United States, where you have the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson, and Uhuru Kenyatta, who is the President of Kenya. I think both of them organized the summit. And then the President was there. Up to now, I do not, apart from what came out, that the President has decided to up budgetary allocation to education by about 50%. That's just all it is. But I'm surprised that nobody
we're
asked the
also
president.
getting a grant, I think. We're also
yes, some support to all the participating countries.
Indeed.
But if the money comes and pupils and students are in their homes, how do you utilize those funds? So I'm surprised that the president was not asked what is happening back home to the educational institutions. There's this Safe School initiative that
Indeed.
was suggested by the United States, and there was so much money. There was a basket of donor funds to implement that. Up to now, nobody knows what has happened, and the situation has gotten worse. I feel very sad as a parent myself, because you every day you watch television, you see women weeping, rolling on the ground for their children, innocent children that they had just sent to school to get basic education. And the universities are not even spared, and you have seen what happened to some universities, selected universities. So it's a crisis situation, and I'm wondering why we have not, as a government, the government has not deemed it fit to declare a state of emergency in the education sector across the country, not just in the north, because it has got to that level.
Huge questions in that regard. But let's take a look at another story right on the front page. Cholera, 22 states, FCT record 31,425 cases, 816 deaths. Wow. It would be one thing to check the number of deaths we've recorded, since COVID broke out, because we always get the status update from the NCDC. This many deaths with cholera in such a short while, because we know we usually record this about the rainy season time, but this is very difficult to assimilate, so to speak. Are you finding it difficult as well?
Well, as I said earlier, it doesn't appear as if anything is shocking to Nigerians anymore. We do not prepare for anything as a country. It's sad. We have so much resources in this country. We can deal with all of this. These are very basic issues of health. Cholera is every year, as you rightly mentioned. When we approach the rainy season, or we're in the middle of it, you see cholera outbreak. Usually it starts from some parts of the north, and then it spreads on, and now we're in the FCT. It's here with us. So if you look at the figures so far, I do not think that within a month of the cholera outbreak, the number of deaths, I think it far outweighs those of the COVID. So it's appalling at the same time, just as it is shocking, because one, we have the Ministry of Health, we have the Ministry of Water Resources, we have so much water around us, there's no clean water for anyone to drink. The government complains about the potentials of having earthquake in the country, because everybody appears to be sinking boreholes. So what is the official intervention to stem that? We do not have a strategy to provide water for citizens. Even in the FCT, how many homes have direct-to-home supply of public water? For me, where I live is a borehole. And I was asking some of our colleagues yesterday, 10 of us, about 8 or so, rely on borehole. So if at this level, as an average citizen, you rely on borehole, what about the rural dwellers, people in the farmlands, a lot of people in IDP homes and all of that? And so this is where cholera outbreak actually starts from, and then it spreads on and on. For me, it is just a general situation of failure. That's just what we have. And so now we have elections in 2023. I think these are some of the very fundamental issues that electorates should be asking those who are seeking to represent us at that level. What will you do in terms of public water supply to homes? What will you do in terms of establishing health facilities? The president is away now, attending hospitals in the UK. For 6 years, we can't even build one world-class hospital. So these are just basic challenges, and it's a collective failure of those who are in government right now.
Well, let's leave it there for leadership newspapers. Ayo.
Quick one through the Vanguard newspaper, Mr. Akeraga, good morning. No end in sight to crisis in APC-PDP. That's what the Vanguard newspaper leads with this morning. And a number of riders right there on the front page. You can do the choosing yourself. It's 2023 is what? Tomorrow? or so it would seem, because it's like the only thing anyone is listening to right now. If you check through the riders, one of them is pointing to the fact that it has to do with 2023. What do you make of this? On the one hand, the ruling party is having its crisis, and the main opposition party, which is supposed to also be performing a democratic function, so to speak, is busy infighting.
I think Nigerians have been left with a difficult option of having to choose between the devil and the deep blue sea. You have the APC in power, APC is in crisis. You have the PDP, the ruling party. It's having a leadership that is a caretaker committee for a ruling party, and since the APC came to power, they've not held a credible national convention where all members of the APC will come together to take decisions. The PDP has, and the PDP is preparing for one, but the PDP itself is also engrossed in very deep internal crisis. Now, why are the parties in crisis? The parties are in crisis because there is no common understanding, there is no political ideology. Basic principles of political science talks about, a framework of understanding for people to come together to agree on certain sets of rules politically that will deliver democracy dividends to the electorates. That is just the entire essence of setting up political parties. For the PDP that was in power for about 16 years before it left power in 2015, it talked about power to the people. All right, power to the people, to what extent? That remains clearly undefined. And then even for members of the PDP itself, you see the internal bickerings and squabbles. For the APC, it is worse because the APC saw all the loopholes in the PDP, and during the administration of former President Goodluck Jonathan, that most people thought was even inept. For the APC, they said President Jonathan, who was the head of that government, was clueless. That was the catchword at the time. But what we have seen, even with the APC, appears to be clueless, more clueless, and more clueless. They just do not have any answer to anything, even the most basic. Where we were in 2015, it is left for anyone, even the supporters of the APC. I have a lot of friends in that political party, and they have agreed with me that even their own party has failed. So it is just a gathering of people who want to grab a piece of the national cake. They are not interested in the welfare of Nigerians, whether the APC. For the PDP, yes, they've learned their lesson. I am just hoping or thinking that maybe seeing the pitfalls that they had and what the APC have also done, maybe there's some kind of repentance. But the evidence on the ground does not suggest that even the PDP has repented. So that is of greater worry to people, to most Nigerians, as we approach the 2023 elections. And that is why it has also become very urgent for private candidates, independent candidates, for the law to come up for independent candidates, so that Nigerians can actually have options. As a journalist, for example, if I want to run for local government chairman in Delta State or even the governor of the state, I do not have the kind of resources that they talk about.
Well,
the political party say you must bring 15 billion for the president and then for government. It is just crazy, So these are the issues.
We have to thank you for your interventions this morning. Thank you so much for shedding a little more light on them. Mr. Aigo Kariga is a member of the Nigeria Guild of Editors. Thank you for your time this morning.
It's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Sunrise Daily continues in a moment. Please stay with us.
Representatives Committee on Health to resolve the problems which led to the ongoing strike by the National Association of Resident Doctors. The resident doctors are demanding payment of salaries, arrears of hazard allowances, insurance benefits, as well as domestication of Residency Training Act. The strike by the resident doctors is crippling the country's health sector and continues despite the federal government's threat to invoke the No Work, No Pay provision in the Trade Disputes Act. The union reiterates its demands at this meeting with federal lawmakers. They are also accusing the head of service, the Ministry of Finance and the Budget Office of moving the payment of the doctors from its system, GIFMIS, to the Integrated Personnel Payroll Information System, IPIS, for selfish reasons.
Sir, I can assure you and this committee that if we have some certain things I can take back to my members who call off the strike. Some are monetary and some are not monetary. The non-monetary, sir, the house officers circular, that circular needs to be withdrawn. Why are we having these bottlenecks? Because some people are not doing their jobs. This is truth. I'll start with UCH, sir. University College Hospital, UCH, employed doctors under gift mix. The first one was in 2019, October. As it speaks now, people under the gift mix platform in UCH is about 901. Those in the budget office can tell for us. 901. There's a list there. I have a list, sir. I have the madam that have been there since January. I saw the list with Nuru. 900 and something people. We didn't have a waiver. The ones you are saying that got a waiver during the pandemic was not in the pandemic.
The union is also condemning the casualization of resident doctors in government employment and calls for urgent actions to end the practice.
The enemy had made it expressly clear that Nigerian doctors reject casualization of the medical practice and medical doctors. Locum is not acceptable. You want to employ doctors, employ Nigerian doctors appropriately.
We in the Ministry of Health, we do not accede or agree to casualization, quote and unquote, of doctors in any guise.
At the end of interaction, the House Committee on Health sets up a committee to resolve the issues in contention. However, the meeting with the union will continue on Tuesday, August 10th. Linda Akibi, Channels Television News.
Well, that's the first issue we're looking at this morning. Available information for now says, the meeting called by the House of Representatives yesterday to try to stop resident doctors from continuing the strike didn't succeed. Of course, you can see from the report right there. And, the claim of the president of the NERD is, as far as they're concerned, some people are not doing their jobs. More than 100 days after an agreement was signed, and nothing, was really done to solve the problem, so to speak. So I guess we are still in the trenches, so to speak. So here we have this morning with us Wale Smarto-Yerinde, who is Deputy Director and Head Membership Services, Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA. Of course, we all know that NECA provides advice and guidance on the whole gamut of human resources management. Hopefully, he'll be able to give us some insight this morning. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Yerinde.
It was our pleasure. Good morning.
We also have Professor Joseph Anna, who is Lead Senior Fellow, Africa Science for Clinical Governance Research and Patient Safety in Calabar, Nigeria. He is Chairman, NMA Standing Committee on Clinical Governance, as well as former Cross River State Commissioner for Health. Thank you for joining us this morning, Prof.
Thank you very much, Channel, and good morning, Nigerians.
Let me begin with you, Prof. First of all, what do you make of all that's happening so far? First of all, there is the code that doctors swear to, that many people are saying, should even be the reason why no one, no medical service, no health care provider should even go on strike in the first place. Essential services, we call them. So what do you make of all that is going on concerning this strike of NERD?
Thank you very much for that question. It's unfortunate that what's going on makes our country look like, quote unquote, a banana republic. It's unfortunate that the health sector is continually dragged into conflict at the expense of the well-being and health and lives of Nigerians. yes, it is true that we swear an oath as doctors when we graduate that we will do our best for our patients. But that oath also says that to enable us deliver on that requirement, the society will take care of us. I remember as a medical student in University of Nigeria Medical School, Enugu campus, it was constantly drummed into our heads that we are in a profession that is totally committed to the well-being of the patient. But that it doesn't matter where we are in the world, the society takes care of us. And that has been my experience, that once you leave Nigeria, you find that doctors are taken care of. Their welfare is the primary concern of the government, so that doctors can remain, and not just doctors, other health workers can remain in the environment of the health facility and deliver care to fulfill that oath. But it's impossible not for the government not to play its own part and expect that the doctors will stick to that pledge that the oath, that demand that the oath places on them. And I tell you one thing, I have not met any doctor, I've not met any colleague anywhere in the world who wants to go on strike, who wants to abandon his or her patient for 1 minute until that patient is well. It's a calling. It's important that Nigeria begin to realize, as we say in clinical governance, we protect the patients, and our employers need to support us to be able to do that. And those two things must come together. Protecting the patient and supporting the caregiver must be done in tandem. It must come together. If you do one and leave the other, it wouldn't work. So it's a shame that our country has been placed in this kind of situation. They make it look as if it's impossible to have peace in the health system. Of course it's possible to have peace. It's not the Holy Grail. There are ways of doing these things and making sure that as we are protecting the patients in our facilities, we are taken care of. And that way we just stay there. Whether it's one-on-one call or 1-in-4 call, we just stay there. So long as we're taken care of. What is the deal? Why is it? The resident doctors went on strike earlier this year, I think April or March. A number of promises were made. That's not the first time. The last time I asked, I was told some of those promises have been coming since 2013. And this is 2021. That's not fair. That's not right. So the doctors, yes, have taken an oath, but please help us to take care of the patient.
Well, Prof, one of the issues that was raised, well, quite a number of them actually, indicate that the states themselves have a huge role to play in the scheme of things. For instance, item 13 observes with serious concern, the NERD observes with serious concern the poor response of most state governments in domesticating the Medical Residency Training Act of 2017. Of course, some states have domesticated, some have not. Quite a number of states actually have not done that, and that's one of several other issues. The federal government also says that a good number of the issues, as far as they are concerned, are on the purview of the states, are within the purview of the states. You've been health commissioner, so you might be able to speak to why there would be such delays in responding to some of those issues at the state level.
Yes, thanks again for that point. Yes, I served as Commissioner for Health in Cross River State, 2004 to 2008. I served two governors. I served His Excellency Mr. Donald Duke, and I served under His Excellency Senator Leo Limoke. Frankly, sitting from where I am and from my experience, I really can't understand what's happening in the States. I can't understand, because in my state, when I was Commissioner for Health, my bosses gave me attention. They listened. If I take a challenge to them, they listened and they try to do the best they can. So I don't really understand what's happening in any other state, but I know that in Cross River State, when I took challenges, when I took issues to my principals, they did something about it. For instance, let me give you an example. When we introduced clinical governance in 2004, very quickly we started reaping the dividends of quality in healthcare. And we have a university teaching hospital in Calabar, which is a federal institution. And then we have our flagship hospital, which is the General Hospital that belongs to the state. Now, we were doing very well with training, with building capacity, with improving competence and the quality of care. But each time the teaching hospital recruited health workers, doctors, nurses, and so on, the staff who had trained in the state service, of course, will migrate. Who wouldn't migrate when the pay in the teaching hospital was about two times more than what the state was giving them? I took that challenge to my principals, and I said, I have a problem. We've done literally everything we could do. We've covered the 12 pillars of clinical governance. There's one thing left. Please, can you help? What is that? Sir, the take-home pay of my staff is a problem. We train everybody from driver to chief consultant, but each time there is a recruitment in the teaching hospital, which is under federal, my staff, we lose them. So we are forever training new staff. What did they do? In 2 steps, they matched the salaries of the state-employed health workers with that of the federal. That was the state government. And I know that Cross River State has never been one of the richest states in the country, but they did that. This is why I'm saying that I don't understand what's happening in the state, really. I don't see why they cannot do it.
All right, Prof. Let me bring it to Mr. Oyunide here with us. First of all, naturally, this is what you would call industrial relations. What do you make of it in the first place? On the one hand, the law says that essential services officers like doctors, policemen, and all shouldn't have reason to go on strike. Yeah. But we have found that happen. On the other hand, there is the responsibility of the authorities to ensure that is not even contemplated in the first place.
Well, thank you for having us once again. I think it's an unfortunate situation that we find ourselves, and ordinarily we shouldn't be at this point. Because within the context of industrial relations, I think I also want to view it from 4 other different contexts. The context of the sanctity of agreements, the context of the sanctity of the law, the context of the sanctity of the oath, the Hippocratic oath by the doctors. And you can't deal with one in isolation of the other, especially within the context of the kind of socio-economic environment in which we operate. Now, industrial relations context, the system itself envisaged conflict. The conflict is inherent in whatever kind of relationship that we have, especially in a work environment relationship. So the IR system envisaged there's going to be crisis. And also there are buffers to make sure that those crises are dealt with in such a way that we don't arrive at a point of quagmire, a point of total breakdown of law and order. And one of those parameters that has been put in place to deal with those issues of crisis is regulations and laws. And for us, we have the labor laws, which is the foundation or the basis that regulates relationships at work. And then we have the Trade Dispute Act that also specifies when there are crises, there will always be crisis. We can't run away from crisis. when there are crises, when there are disputes, there are also mechanisms that the law has put in place for us to address those crises. And if all parties involved take due diligence and are responsible enough to follow the processes that have been stipulated in the Trade Dispute Act, hardly will you get to the point where you have a total breakdown of law and order as we have, because it stipulates parties must try to settle those issues themselves. If they can't settle, they go to conciliation. If they can't conciliate, they go to arbitration. If the arbitration doesn't work, then the minister can apprehend the dispute. Then the final point is the NIC, National Industrial Court. And then at the National Industrial Court, if they're not satisfied, they can also appeal. So at every point in time, the law provides opportunity for us to dialogue, for us to engage, for us to resolve those issues. And it's now the responsibility of each party involved to make sure that at every point they are responsible enough to work within the parameters of that law. The Prof mentioned the issue of except we are degenerating into a banana republic. You know, if you take the law within the context of us, take the law out of the context of us, then we are probably living in an animal kingdom, which is not palatable to anybody. Then the second context is the context of the sanctity of agreement. And for us, I think what has broken down is not necessarily dialogue. I think what has broken down is trust between government and between the NARD.
What do you think informed that?
I think over time, from trend, you can't rule. NARD is not a trade union; they are an association, but they also operate within an ecosystem. Within an ecosystem that they've probably seen that agreements are breached conveniently. So for them, while negotiating or while signing MOU, signing agreements, probably it's possible that within the context of their mind, they're looking at, okay, will this agreement will it be honored? Will it not be honored? And if it's not honored, even renegotiating an agreement that has been signed is also permissible. We can agree, sign an agreement, sign an MOU, and if I realize for whatever reason there are circumstances or reasons why I cannot fulfill the terms of the agreement, nothing stops me from calling the other party and say, look, let's renegotiate the agreement that we have agreed, because certain parameters, certain issues that are beyond me or beyond my capacity, beyond my control, as a reason. So it takes a lot of good faith, a lot of trust for us to continue to engage in that. Once trust breaks down, then whatever you say will always be misinterpreted. Well, and that contributed to the point where we are currently.
One of the challenges that I think maybe could have irked the NARD is the question of timing, because in all of the parameters that you've talked about, you didn't mention time at all. Yeah. I'd want to ask the Prof this as well, but in terms of there seems to be no timeline, so to speak, as to the time within which the agreements should have been met, or at least significant progress made to convince the NARD that, look, we mean well, we intend to follow through in the agreements that we have made to you and all of that. For instance, in their letter, of resuming this strike, which they suspended in April, they said more than 100 days after, 113 days specifically, nothing was done as far as they were concerned. If any needle was being moved, it was probably moving invisibly as far as they were concerned. They weren't seeing any movement. So is there a challenge of timeline that should have been considered in getting this done?
It would be very dangerous to postulate based on what government is saying or what the NARD is saying without having been part of that process that they are following. Because the government have said conciliation is going on, conversation is going on, meetings are going on. The NARD said, look, the timeline is too long. But expectedly, we expect that basically when the MOU has been signed, there always should be timelines. You cannot sign an agreement that is just open-ended. There always should be timelines, and there always should should be measurement of those timelines. Okay, you do this within this period, then we review what you have done, then we move to the next stage of implementation. Now, if there is no timeline, then that creates a lacuna for either party to exploit. If you take out the issue of good faith. With good faith, you don't have to really go into the nitty-gritty of ABC, on the 31st of July, 5 a.m., 5:02 a.m., this must be done, if there's good faith. But once there is that lacuna, then it opens up the opportunity for either party to exploit that. But beyond the issue of
do you think that lacuna is being exploited by maybe the government or the NRD?
We wouldn't say so explicitly, but from what we've seen, we are not privy to the agreement, so it becomes dangerous for you to make categorical statements on whether there are timelines or whether somebody is exploiting or not. But for what has broken down is, one, either party has not followed the due process as established by the Trade Dispute Act.
Okay, let me take that before you go to other issues. Let me ask Prof about that same thing of timeline. More than 100 days after an agreement was signed between government and an association, nothing was done. Well, you've been in government, so perhaps you can educate us on maybe the kind of bureaucratic bottlenecks that could have stalled that kind of progress that we should have made more than 100 days ago.
Well, thank you very much. On the issue of timing, again, I find it very difficult to understand why what is happening. It's happening and keeps happening. If you sign an MOU, before you sign the MOU, before you come to an agreement, on your part, as government, you already knew what you are able to deliver. And once you sign the MOU and the other party has gone back and suspended its industrial action, you prioritize that MOU. If it means sitting in the room and working overnight, you do that and begin to implement the terms of your MOU, because it's a contract, you signed it. And before you signed it, you knew exactly what resources you had. So yes, the MOU must have some timelines. And in fact, I remember that when the strike was suspended earlier this year, some timelines were mentioned. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think timelines were mentioned. So the MOU has timelines. But even if it doesn't have, as government, in my experience, the moment you signed an MOU like that to avert a crisis or to solve a crisis, you prioritize that. It comes up to the top of the priority. And you begin to discuss how you're going to implement what you have promised. And as Ms. Oyerinde rightly said, if for one reason or the other, maybe the economic situation has changed a bit, or for whatever reason, you find that you are not able to deliver within that timeline, and the other party is giving you signals that its members are becoming restive, they might go out of strike again. Surely you try and do something about it. Because
we're about to take a break now. Just 1 second. Just 1 second, Prof. Are you suggesting that government has not prioritized this agreement?
I would like to believe that they have prioritized it, but if they have, what is the outcome?
Okay, we'll take a short break. Just 1 second, Prof. We'll take a short break now to take some messages, and we'll resume this conversation afterwards. Please stay with us. Well, this doctor's strike is an issue we're still taking a look at. The federal government is still finding ways to have an agreement with the NRD, and we're having a conversation around how that can be done. Markwe has a few questions as well. Markwe.
Thank you, Ayo. Let me start with Professor Anna. He did say that he wants to believe that government prioritized the agreement which was signed with the doctors. In fact, the agreement was called a memorandum of action, not even just of understanding. And much as the reports we just highlighted now raises, very ethical questions about the use, excuse me, of strike actions by doctors. I do not know what your reading has been of government's response. When this notice of strike came up, I do not know if you were able to see what the reaction of government was, and if that would have been a reaction that you would have recommended on the part of government.
Thank you, Marve. I don't know which of the reactions you are referring to. I recall that when the strike started, I think for the first day or two, there was hardly any reaction. And then eventually the reaction came, and I don't think it's the best reaction, really, considering that government hasn't kept its own part of the bargain, which is why the strike is happening again. I would have thought that the first reaction would have been to call in the NARD, and if you have challenges, explain the challenges to them. As I said, I would like to believe government has prioritized this matter, because it's life and death we're talking about here. We're talking about lives. What can be more important than that? Today we're okay, we're healthy, we're talking to you on the television. Who knows what will happen in the next hour, tomorrow, the day after? And by the way, illness doesn't select. It just happens to anybody. We are all mortal, it's going to happen. So it has to be prioritized. And if they've prioritized it, what is the challenge? What is stopping the action? You say it's memorandum of action. What is stopping the action, the implementation? Maybe that's where the question we should be answering. What is stopping the action? What is stopping the implementation of agreements that are arrived at freely? What is stopping it?
So, Prof, we want to believe that you wear, two hats. You're a doctor, you've also worked in government, and if anybody will understand just how slowly bureaucracy works in government, you will. But you also are raising questions as to what actions are being carried out. Now, when you talked about the fact that there was no reaction in the first 2 days or so, on the part of government, there were huge questions about that. I think for a number of people, that's where concerns started coming up. And then when we did get one, it was that the doctors should go back to work, and that there was a legal judgment of some sort declaring their own strike action illegal. And we had the Minister of Labour saying that doctors should go back to work, otherwise he will invoke the no work, no pay rule. So it does raise huge questions as to whether or not government indeed considered the agreement which they signed a priority. Because assuming they did, would we have seen the sort of reaction or lack of it which we saw?
That's exactly my point. And my experience, if I go back to my personal experience, when I was in government, we couldn't possibly sign a memorandum of action or whatever I want to call it and not deliver on it. We don't go to sleep. We work on it and make sure we deliver on our pledge, on our promise. We implement it, because we know that if we don't, we're going to go back to square one. And it's not in the interest of anybody for the health system to literally grind to a halt. Ever so often, we're actually a laughing stock outside in the rest of the world. They're wondering what is happening to us, especially when our doctors or our other health workers go elsewhere and deliver and shine. So why can't we be allowed to deliver within our country?
What is the problem? What do you think then could be responsible for the lethargy which we seem to be noticing on the part of government officials. I don't know, do you think that this is because you talked about how you will take this to your bosses and, you know, it gets attended to? Do you think that they are not getting the cooperation as the ministers now, are not getting the cooperation which they seek at the highest level? Or is it that we are so overwhelmed? Don't forget that it will also demand resources being appropriated and also cash backed. Do you think that there is, you know, bottlenecks in terms of getting what has been appropriated for these doctors to the ministry? I don't know. Are you able to? I don't know if you've been able to speak or have backroom conversations. Something that could possibly explain the seeming lethargy which we seem to notice on the part of government.
Yes, the government is not. It's not demonstrating to Nigerians, not demonstrating to us that it's taking the issue of our health very seriously, because no matter how many discussions are going on behind the scenes, until something actually happens, those discussions don't matter to anybody. Patients are roaming the streets looking for care to take. They get to hospital and they can't get the care. The doctors, the caregivers are complaining that apart from the fact that there are no equipment, there is no running water, there is no lights, there's no that, they're also not paid for the work that they have put in month after month. So I don't know what challenges our colleagues who are ministers today are facing. But frankly, I think that's where what Nigerians need to be asking. What is stopping? Well, we've read in one or two papers about head of service and Ministry of Finance. And is that where the blockage is? Is it that the Ministry of Health decides to do something, and when it goes to Ministry of Finance says, oh, we don't have the money? So where was Ministry of Finance when the memorandum of action was signed? Was there a discussion within government about how to do it? As I said, in my experience, once we agreed that we are going to do X, we did it. Because we would have done our homework before we put our pen on paper signature, so that our word will count, our signatures will count, so that we have the trust of the people we have sent out to manage patients. And by the way, I repeat, today we're not patients, tomorrow we're going to be patients. Is that what those in Ministry of Finance, or I don't know if that's what the problem is, but if that's what the problem is, are they not human beings as well? Don't they understand what it means for us to be alive? So I don't know what the problem is, but whatever it is, government needs to show that it has prioritized health as important. If the resources are down for one reason or the other, then you can revise the agreement by inviting the other party before they walk out on strike again. Because I tell you, and I repeat, I have not met one colleague, one doctor anywhere within Nigeria, outside Nigeria, who is ready, who wants to go on strike. I've not met one in how many years of practice. So the question is, what is stopping the Ministry of Health implementing agreements after they've signed it? That's what the question should be.
It is interesting that you've made reference to the breakdown of trust. So let me come to Mr. Wale Smart Onyeride, who also made reference to that. That it's not a breakdown of dialogue, it's a breakdown of trust. Before now, we had seen the House of Representatives wade into this matter. On a number of occasions, the association, that's NARD, has called off or suspended its strike action on the intervention of the House of Representatives. And we even saw yesterday the chairman of the House Committee on Health talking about insincerity on the part of government. Nonetheless, they're back at it, you know, facilitating dialogue between NAD and government on the other hand. Now, I'm wondering, how optimistic, because yesterday we understand that the meeting didn't yield much. It was still a stalemate. They're going to continue meeting today. What would it take to build back the trust? Considering that this is not the first meeting, it is as a result of the agreement signed through meetings like this, which have not been honored, is the reason why the NAD is back on strike. What do you think it will take to reassure the doctors that whatever is in the pipeline is already about to come out of it? I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Thank you. I think, trust is something once broken, then it takes twice the effort to build it, to rebuild. And in this case, in this particular case, I think one thing that government can do, and also the doctors, is both parties to show some level of responsibility. What we preach in our association, in NECA, is responsible enterprises. So whether the enterprise is private, whether it's government, the imperative for responsible enterprises cannot be overemphasized. Now, an MOA, Memorandum of Action, has been signed. I think one of the things that government can do, and fundamentally before you sign an agreement, a Memorandum of Understanding, Memorandum of Action, whatever you call it, there should always be a mandate that whatever we are signing, we have the mandate of either the employers or either government to sign, because we have the capacity to implement. And I also mentioned earlier, for whatever reason, if we cannot implement after signing, for whatever reason, also we have the due diligence, we have the responsibility to call the other party to the same table where we negotiate and say, look, for certain reasons, we are facing these challenges, we cannot implement this, but we'll implement this, and also setting timelines for the implementation of all those. So one of the things to build trust, because whether we agree or not, we cannot all work outside the context of the law. That is
the agreement.
Yes, we cannot work outside the context of the law.
Assuming for whatever reason there are parts of the agreement. I don't know if you can hear me now. Assuming for whatever reason there are parts of the agreement which they are finding very difficult to implement as we speak, for whatever reason, will it be too late to say that now? Or do you think that this trust is broken down way too badly for government to now say, hey, look, as a result of what has happened in the past, or whatever reason, we're going to find it difficult to implement A and B? Is it too late in the day to say that?
It's not too late. It's never too late in negotiation, because the relationship continues. Whether they go to court, whether they come back from court, the employer-employee relationship still continues. So it's never too late. So if there are reasons why those agreements cannot be implemented, the government, that is the employer now, and NLD will still have to come back to the table. The unfortunate thing is this, and where it's so unfortunate is this. No matter how far we go, no matter the crisis, no matter the grandstanding by both parties, and as you are aware, as both parties are taking positions, patients are dying in the hospitals. The NLD, they are violating the Hippocratic oath, and government is also not living to its responsibility of meeting those agreements that it has signed. Those things have consequences, far-reaching consequences for the long-term relationship. But whether they go to court, whatever happens, both parties will still have to come back to the table to either implement or renegotiate those terms of that agreement. So the trust can still be rebuilt. It's never too late to rebuild that trust. And as I said, it's an employer-employee relationship. The relationship continues into far into the future. So government can call them back. And one of the things we should have done, if you permit me, is this. And one of the things NLD should have done, one of the things we should have done before now is what we are doing now. Reaching out to critical stakeholders like the House of Reps has done.
The House of Reps has always intervened in this matter. That's what Mapwe opened with the other time. The House of Reps has intervened even before the strike was suspended in the first place. In fact, it was the instrumentality of the intervention of the House of Representatives that saw to them suspending the strike in the first place. And then a memorandum of action was called by government, was signed with government, and we're where we are now. But in fostering this trust and this communication that you talked about the other time, the Minister of Labor and Productivity, for instance, who is supposed to be the conciliar, has also come out to say, look, if you guys don't go back to work, I'm going to invoke the no work, no pay policy. Is it time for that, or is it too early?
Well, the Minister of Labor's position is a bit complex, because is the Minister of Labor ordinarily is to be the one midwifing the crisis, finding a way, and also is representing the employers, government. So his position is dual, and with both having two-edged swords. So for government, I think we cannot still run away from the issue of coming back to that agreement that was signed. The minister has enormous powers, as conferred on him by law, to invoke whatever provision of the law to make sure that both parties come to the table. If the minister is not directly involved, now the minister is representing the employers and invoking the provisions of the law to the letter will always be seen, be perceived as an attempt to coerce or an attempt to incapacitate the other party. So his position is quite difficult. That notwithstanding, I said we cannot work we cannot take the whole context outside the provisions of the law. And the law has given provisions, has given mechanisms for us to deal with it. So we will suggest this. We'll come back to the negotiating table. If there are reasons, for whatever reasons government cannot meet A, B, and C, then we'll come back to the issue of good faith. Let government be open enough to say, look, A, B, C, D, we cannot deal with now. We'll deal with later. And anyhow, C. Also, I think it's very important we mention this. And the crisis, as I mentioned, goes beyond the issue of the strike. It goes to the fabrics. It eats the fabrics of our society, the fabrics of who we are, when life itself has lost value. Because if life has not lost value, then government will treat essential services as being essential, and NLC will treat the oath as being very fundamental to their practice.
Okay. Well, let me just take the closing comments of Professor Joseph Anna on this issue. What would be your parting shot, so to speak, your candid counsel to maybe government or NERD, if you can do that within the shortest possible time?
Yes, thank you very much. I want to say that we must realize, like other governments around the world have realized, that when the Hippocratic Oath was crafted, it was crafted with the proviso that the health workers, the doctors, will be taken care of. And under that, they will now deliver the best possible care that they can deliver. Secondly, I want to say to government, no work, no pay. I mean, the last time I checked, I don't think the fire service will recommend that instead of putting out a fire, you pour petrol onto the fire. There is a memorandum of action. Government, if you have a challenge, because they haven't told us they have a challenge with implementing it, or maybe I'm not aware of that. But if they have a challenge with implementing what they signed in March or April, then call the upper party to the table. There are doctors, and I've said before, I've not met one doctor who wants to be on strike. Every doctor wants to be in the beat, attending to patients. So government, or NRD, if you have challenges, let them know what the challenges are, and let them know.
Okay.
But don't allow doctors to go on strike in the first place, and then you start throwing threats around. It doesn't work.
Well, thank you very much, Prof, for your counsel this morning, and let's just hope that everyone who needs to is listening. Professor Joseph Anna is lead senior fellow, Africa Center for Clinical Governance Research and Patient Safety in Calabar, as well as chairman NMA Standing Committee on Clinical Governance, He was also Cross River State Commissioner for Health. We've also had Mr. Wale Smarto Yorinde, Deputy Director and Head Membership Services, NECA. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Our pleasure.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
So, Sunrise Daily continues with something related after now.
Well, indeed, that was the situation last week, and a number of people thought that by this week, in fact, the authorities too thought that by this week, in fact, today was supposed to be the day when the kickoff of administering the Moderna vaccine was supposed to start after what was supposed to have been routine checks, it was seen by NAFDAC. But it looks like it's more than just routine, because we found out that the federal government eventually postponed the exercise owing to unforeseen circumstances. Well, joining us now to shed a little more light on what could be the results of the unforeseen circumstances, when we know also that those vaccines also have a very limited shelf life. We have joining us right now Professor Mojisola Adeyeye, who is the Director General of the National Agency for Food, Drug Administration and Control, NAFDAC. Madam, you're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning. Well, I could barely hear you. I'm hoping that when next I throw the next question, you will be able to. I will be able to hear you sufficiently. But ma'am, do tell us, initially we thought this was going to be just some routine checks on the part of NAFDAC, because we understand that the administration of the Moderna vaccines is supposed to kick off today, but that is now not the case. What exactly is the issue with the vaccines? Did NAFDAC find anything wrong?
Actually, no, NAFDAC did not find anything wrong with the quality of the vaccine. We tested the vaccine and it was okay, good for use, safe for use. However, NAFDAC does what is called track and trace of all COVID vaccine distributed throughout the country. And unfortunately, the packaging doesn't have the full information for that tracking and tracing. Therefore, we have to improvise, meaning we have to get labels affixed to the boxes so that we can track and trace the distribution of the vaccines across the country. We did that for Covishield, or the AstraZeneca that came from India. Because the information was already there on the packaging. It has nothing to do with the quality. It is just on the packaging. And why is that barcoding? Let me just break it down. Barcoding is so important. It is important to make sure that the vaccine that is taken to any part of the country is the same vaccine that left Abuja. And NAFDAC is the only country in Africa that is using this technology. It is called GS1 driven technology to follow up the vaccine wherever they go in the country. So we are doing that as we speak, and by the end of the week that should be completed. Thank you.
That's definitely good to know. I mean, that there's nothing wrong with the quality of the vaccines. But then there were questions as to where, because we also read in a few of the dailies, we also took the story yesterday, that there was incomplete documentation. Was that what they meant by incomplete documentation which accompanied the vaccines?
There was some missing documents in terms of the shipping. Documentation which we got the same day that we were supposed to get them just a little later. So that had nothing to do with the delay. The delay again is due to this labeling, that extra labeling that we need to put on the secondary packaging. But the documentation is fine. now. There was nothing wrong with the Moderna vaccine. The expiration is 6 months, and I'm sure by the end of October, November, we'll probably exhaust the whole vaccine. So we're going to be in a good shape as a country.
Okay. What about talk that this was not produced in facilities approved by the World Health Organization? I don't know if you're able to. Is it possible that some vaccines are not produced where the WHO has approved?
No, the vaccines were produced in facilities approved by World Health Organization. That was why they gave it emergency use listing category. What happens with vaccines right now is, or manufacturing, is that sometimes you have 2 or 3 different sites for production of the vaccines. But even in this case, it is only one site in the US where this came from, so there is no issue with the manufacturing site. That manufacturing site was approved by the WHO emergency use listing mechanism.
Well, I think it is, for a number of Nigerians, it is very reassuring, because a number of people just thought, okay, NAFDAC was going to test the vaccines. Hey, this is 4 million vaccines which have already arrived the country. Will NAFDAC say, no, we cannot use the vaccines? But it's turned out that NAFDAC certification is indeed very important. Can you speak to the role of NAFDAC certification in even in situations like this where we have received vaccines which we had long been expecting?
Thank you very much. NAFDAC started this preparation for vaccine arrival since last year. The agency is the first country in Africa to write the guidance, the preparedness guidance. So we take this very seriously because our goal is to safeguard the health of our people. So once the vaccine dossier is made available, we look at the document very, very carefully, and we use 3 mechanisms actually. We use reliance, meaning a stringent regulatory country like US, UK, they've already approved that vaccine. We take the assessment report, but we take it with a grain of salt, to say, and make sure that anything that is peculiar to our own population or that may be peculiar to our own population, we note very well, irrespective of the approval that they've already given. That is one mechanism. And also another mechanism is through WHO emergency use listing. WHO takes time to examine the dossier and whatnot. But even that, we take time to look at what they have approved, because the population that was used in testing may be different from ours. The way everybody responds to medicines is different, so we cannot just take what anybody has approved outside the country just like that. So we do due diligence. We have about 6 directorates that come together, meaning multidisciplinary group. They come together and look line by line through the dossier to make sure that we note what is there or the peculiarities. Because as soon as the vaccine arrives, we have to test it in the lab. We've got to test it in the lab to ensure that what is on the WHO, EUL, or what other regulatory agency has approved is the same thing that we are getting. So we do the testing and then we do the release. That is when it can be used, in the vaccination program. So we do a lot as a regulatory agency. Then after the vaccine is being given to people, we have to do safety monitoring to ensure that similar side effects that were reported in the dossier are what we are getting, or if it is different, because we are different population, to note such side effects. because about every 2 weeks, regulatory agencies across the world come together and share any side effect that may be peculiar to one vaccine versus the or the other rather, so that we will note that this emergency use authorization can lead to full approval in the future. And that means that we have already noted all the clinical outcomes that mightn't have been noted during the development, that we've noted it and we have documented it and put it, sent it to a central database. So it is extremely important what NAFDAC does or what any regulatory agency does across the world regarding the vaccines or any other commodity.
So it's not just routine. This is not just a question of, well, they have come. It's not ceremony. There is actually a serious procedure going on behind the scenes to ensure that whatever comes into the country is fit for the Nigerian population.
Exactly. It is something that is a 24/7. Once the vaccine dossier comes, it is 24/7 work for 15 days for the vaccine committee. And after that, they write their reports, they give it to me, then I will look and make sure that everything is fine, edit whatever needs to be edited, come together with the vaccine committee or members of the vaccine committee to discuss whatever we need to clarify before sending it to the minister. It is a very arduous and serious task on our part. First, because we cannot play with vaccines and our people. We cannot play with any commodity, actually. I take that personally because drugs can make and unmake. And our job as a regulatory agency is to ensure that what that medicine is developed for is what the patient gets. So it's a very serious business.
I think that's very reassuring, but let's just get this very clear. So assuming for whatever reason you found that these vaccines were not suitable for our population, do you think that it will be too political or politically incorrect for you to say, no, we're sorry, as an agency, we cannot approve this for the use of the Nigerian people? Would you? I don't know if you could ever picture such a scenario.
Yes, I can picture that type of scenario. Our goal is to make sure that what is going into the public space for use by our people is of quality, it is safe. If it is not of quality, if it is not safe, we will reject it. We will reject it because I cannot sleep in the night and think that the vaccine that we have approved or any drug commodity that we have approved is going to affect patients adversely or the public adversely. So I can easily do that. I've taught manufacturing. I taught manufacturing for about 20 years in the US. My job is to ensure that there is quality in any product. That was what I did for 30 years. So I don't lose any sleep about it in terms of, oh, this is not good or this is good, let's go. I don't lose sleep at all because it is my profession. It is what I've taught students from across the world, and it is a product that my own people will use. So whichever way you look at it, it is a very serious business for me. Thank you very much.
It's very reassuring, Professor Adeyeye, but I'm going to have to send this to my colleague now, Ayo.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, Prof, one of the issues that's still bothering the entire health community in the world, and I'm sure you must have considered it as well, is what the chief executive of BioNTech, who made the Pfizer vaccine, talked about when he said it's quite possible that in the next 6 to 12 months, further variants will emerge and would require adaptation of the vaccine, meaning that another variant of this same COVID-19 could come that, you know, the first generation vaccines that we have will not be effective against them, and that would call for some modification of the vaccine. It raises just one question in my mind, Professor, and that is, local production of vaccines. Should we find ourselves in that situation, it definitely will be an issue. First time we had 4 million doses of the vaccine, and now another 4 million, and you know the number of people that we are dealing with in our country, Prof. So what's any hopes, any steps, any progress made in getting that locally made vaccine that you talked about previously?
Yes, there is a lot. Thank you very much again. There is a lot of progress. I'm passionately drawn to local content, because COVID-19 pandemic has taught us a lesson that you cannot be too over-dependent on other countries. Because at the beginning of this pandemic, many health commodities couldn't leave India. India government banned them from being exported, and Nigeria was left hanging. The same thing from China. China was fighting COVID. We couldn't get anything from China. So in terms of
Oh, wow. I'm pretty sure that we will get the Prof back really soon, because that is a critical thing. Marco, you would recall that there have been times, every time we have had reason to talk with Prof on this matter, her own issue has always been, first of all, what are the things that we can do from within ourselves? So, Prof, please continue. We lost your communication for a bit.
Yes, so the local content is being discussed as we speak concerning COVID vaccine. I'm the chair of the COVID vaccine task force that the minister, the honorable minister, put together. We are working feverishly, assiduously, to ensure that we're going to have local manufacturing of vaccine. The government has a partnership, public-private partnership, with a company, BioVaccine. The government has 49 stake in that company. And that company actually was set up originally to manufacture routine vaccines. But now they put a COVID-19 vaccine in their template. So that's we're already working on. And I believe that within the next 6 months to 1 year, a lot of work will have been, or will be happening on the ground. And we also have eminent Nigerians across the world heading different agencies that are supporting us on this. We're going to make sure that we have local content or local manufacturing. In terms of local manufacturing, it is also hand in hand with what NAFDAC does. Because WHO wants to be sure that any country that is going to manufacture vaccine has a strong regulatory agency. And what NAFDAC has been going through for 3.5 years is to make sure that that is going to happen. And it is almost happening, because there's what is called the maturity level 3, which we are almost at the point of getting. We got our audit about a month ago, and it was very successful, but they will be coming again in few months to really declare our maturity level. So it is not just having a local manufacturing, it's also having a very strong regulatory agency, so that whether it is inspection or whether it is actually the building, the building has to be such that it has good manufacturing practice outlet. Without the building standards, it cannot even happen. So now that building itself to the approval of the facility and then the product. So it's, we're going to have it by the grace of God. We're going to have local manufacturing very soon.
It'll be gratifying to know, Prof, how soon that will be. Plus, is funding going to be an issue? We've always had talks about that one. Is funding going to be an issue?
I don't think so. The federal government has committed money towards this venture, this initiative of local manufacturing. especially with this bio-vaccine company that has a 49% government investment in it. So there will not be any issue in terms of funding. Aside from the money that the federal government is going to provide, there are international partners that will also contribute towards it. So I believe it's going to be a success.
I asked that against the backdrop of the fact that many researchers, especially in health in our country, say that funding has always been an issue for them.
Yes, funding has always been an issue, but for this government, Buhari government, COVID-19 pandemic woken everybody up in terms of the neglect in the health sector for decades. The health sector was neglected for decades. Therefore, the government realized this and started putting money towards the different health sectors. For example, this time last year, I was brokering between CBN and pharmaceutical manufacturers in Nigeria in terms of giving them intervention funding for infrastructure development. And it is so gratifying now to see many local pharmaceutical companies redesigning, rebuilding their facilities from this low interest rate, low interest rate loan that has been given. So the government is really supporting our health sector now. And thank God for COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, low interest rate is not a medical term, so I can understand you looking for the right words. But, you know, I mean, when you talk about the funding, Prof, I'm sorry to have to ask you this, but it begs the question of if government is indeed funding the health sector as well, one wonders why it's so difficult to carry along the people who are working in the sector, like the NARD.
It's unfortunate that it is easier to break something down than to build it up. This is a result of decades of neglect. Whether it is infrastructure, whether it is manpower, a lot of neglect has happened over the years. And we are just reaping the dividends of neglect, of decay for over 30 years. I left this country about 38, well, it's going to 40 years ago now, and it wasn't this way. But we neglected everything. We depended.
And from Asians, development is local. It can be globalized with time.
Well, there are so many of those messages. Maybe we'll just take one more. Olagunju Oladele says, when COVID-19 hit Nigeria, we were aided with money to get our health system prepared for this scary war, only to see that we're not only fighting the virus, we're also fighting a government that doesn't seem to care about the healthcare system. The principal doesn't even seem to trust to use it since he became the leader.
And one more now from Demola Lalade saying, to be honest, it's a shame that the resident doctor strike is still on as we speak, and government has not yielded to their demands. They provide very essential service to the people, and I'm sure their demands will be reasonable enough for government to consider. Why they have not baffles me. Well, there's a very lengthy one from Daniel Adeyinka. We see yours, Victor Owo, Bolanle Oluwadare, Festus Akimboyewa, and a number of others which were totally out of time, but for time would love to take them. Thank you so much for being a part of this program, for sending in your comments and contributions. I'm Maupa Ogun Yusuf, wishing you a lovely day.
Yeah, we'll probably open with some of them tomorrow. In the meantime, have a wonderful day and please stay safe. I'm Ayo Makinde.